The Met Office says there's potential for fast-flowing or deep floodwater to cause danger to life today after heavy downpours and strong winds battered much of the country. A yellow wind warning has come into force as well for large parts of England, with gusts of up to 65 miles per hour expected in some places. A man died yesterday morning after a tree fell on his car due to the weather conditions. Meteorologists have described it as a multi-hazard storm. 2 other people died yesterday in crashes on the roads due to the stormy weather, one in West Yorkshire and another in Northamptonshire, although it's not known if they were directly related to the weather conditions. In other news, Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says NATO countries are involved in a hidden cyber war with Russia. That says the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster will warn that Russia could turn the lights off and won't think twice about exploiting defence gaps in the UK. Pat McFadden is expected to give the warning to NATO members next week. In a speech, he'll urge countries to bolster cybersecurity and not underestimate the threat of cyber warfare from Russia. It follows warnings from experts last night who urged Britain to remain firm and stand strong against Vladimir Putin's threats. Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Kevin Hollinrake told GB News Labour need to increase the UK's defence spending now.
One of the highest spenders in NATO, constantly have been, but we recognise there are growing threats around the world, and that's why we committed to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. And that is a commitment not matched by the Labour government. They've made some kind of general commitment to get there at some point in the future, but the threat is now, and we should bolster our defences now. We made that firm commitment. Labour should do the same.
Elsewhere, the Justice Secretary says the state should never offer death as a service. Shabana Mahmood made those comments in a strongly worded intervention over the assisted dying bill ahead of an historic Commons vote next week. In a letter to constituents, Ms Mahmood said she was profoundly concerned by the legislation, not just for religious reasons, but also because it could create a slippery slope towards death on demand. Well, she's previously made clear she would vote against the bill alongside Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who faced a backlash after suggesting the changes would cost the NHS more. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has declined to say whether he will back the bill, arguing that he doesn't want to pressure MPs. Chief Executive of Labour Together, Jonathan Ashworth, told GB News it's not a good idea.
There are 2 things that would concern me. First of all, I just worry about the pressure that this would put people who are in the most desperate of circumstances, the pressure they would be under. I just think it would change societal norms about that, and I'm not sure that we're ready for that as a society. And secondly, we all know that end-of-life care in the country is just not satisfactory. The hospice movement are phenomenal, but they have been underfunded for years. And I just don't want people feeling that they are a burden or that they feel their time is up and they have to make these decisions.
Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has called a financial package for developing nations a critical 11th hour deal at the 11th hour for the climate as the United Nations Environmental Conference drew to a close. Delegates at the COP29 in Azerbaijan agreed a new climate finance target. They pledged $300 billion a year, that's £239.5 billion, to help poorer countries deal with the impacts of climate change, with rich countries leading the payments. It was feared the conference would collapse after some of the poorest nations had walked out of those talks. US President Joe Biden said that while substantial work remained to be done, the conference had set an ambitious international climate finance goal. And finally, in sport, Novak Djokovic has appointed Andy Murray to coach him into and through the Australian Open. Announcing the collaboration, Djokovic said he's excited to have one of his greatest rivals on the same side of the net. In a video posted on X, the Serbian said, "We had some of the most epic battles in our sport. I thought our story was over, but it turns out it has one final chapter." 3-time Grand Slam winner Murray retired in August after exiting the men's doubles at the Paris Games. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Back to Michael.
Thank you very much, Tatiana Sanchez. Rachel Reeves is the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. Her first budget has proved unpopular. which is not surprising since it set out to raise tens of billions of pounds in additional taxation. But has it been as apt as it could have been? Is she politically astute to plunge some poorer pensioners below the official poverty line by eliminating their winter fuel payments? Is it a good look to anger farmers so that they descend on London to protest? Does she lack political nous? And is she less experienced as a banker than her curriculum vitae had led us to believe? Does her re-editing of her career resume make her less impressive and less trustworthy? I'm joined now by my panel, Policy Fellow at the think tank Onward, Andrew Barclay, Chief Political Correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, and former Labour advisor, Matthew Lazar. Welcome to you all.
Good morning.
Andrew, you are an entrepreneur. Do you believe that the budget has been a budget for growth?
No, definitely not. I mean, Labour were given this stonking mandate for growth, but it's very hard to see where that's going to come from. It doesn't come from tax rises. It's not going to come from increasing amounts of regulation. And it's clear to see who are the winners in the budget, and it's clear to see who the losers are in the budget. And I'm afraid that I think business, small business, entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs who are looking to set up their businesses, they're all in the latter category. And so I don't see where the growth is going to come from. You know, if you start taxing something, it's generally because you want less of it. And I appreciate they've got a budget to balance, but it's very hard to see where their growth strategy actually is.
You said there were winners. Who were they?
I mean, the winners seem like it's the public sector, all the pay rises, you know, no conditions, no reform, no productivity increases with those pay rises to go with it, unions. And the losers, as I said, is, you know, pensioners, farmers, small business owners, big businesses. I think there was 80 retail bosses yesterday coming out saying they're going to be forced to lay workers off. I think even the Bank of England have given Rachel Reeves' old employer, given a warning that this is going to contract.
Briefly, her employer.
Briefly, yeah, going to contract the economy. I think the Purchasing Managers Index saying that the private sector is now contracted. So it's very hard to see the growth in this budget.
Aubrey Allegretti, as I said, this is a budget that set out to raise money, and therefore it's hardly surprising that it's not particularly popular. But let's go to the question of aptness. Do you think this was clumsy, or do you think it was well constructed?
I think there were elements of it which were clearly not as apt as they could have been. I mean, I remember the day after the budget, and I sat down with a Labour MP in a rural constituency who predicted exactly what would happen, which was that farmers would turn out en masse in Parliament Square to protest. They said, farmers are really popular people, it'll be a terrible look for us, and this will become a sort of millstone round our necks. And that's exactly what's happened. And they realised that within 24 hours of the budget being delivered. So I suspect that in the sort of feeling around to try and understand exactly what policies would work and land with voters well, there were clearly some missteps. Now, the government will probably argue that farmers are not the sort of people that it necessarily needs in order to build a successful electoral coalition. And they certainly helped Labour win back lots of rural seats at the last election, but they were by no means contingent on Labour getting a majority, nor will they be next time.
And what about the pensioners? I mean, it's now emerged that some pensioners, who are obviously not the very poorest, but they're pretty poor nonetheless, will actually be plunged below the poverty line, the government's own measure by this measure.
Certainly, some Labour MPs are really struggling to hold their nose at this, particularly when you combine it with Keir Starmer's stance on retaining the two-child benefit cap. This is not something that lots of Labour MPs or ministers got into government to do. But when you speak to them, they say, we'd rather be in government making these tough choices than outside, not able to influence anything. So the question is how quickly you move to a place where, as Andrew was talking about, you get the growth, which has been promised, in order to deliver the revenue in tax receipts that means that you can then pay for these measures. So, you know, whether that's reinstating the winter fuel allowance as a universal measure or giving back the two-child benefits so that there's no longer a cap. Those issues, I think, are going to be plaguing Labour MPs. And when you speak to them in the run-up to the spending review for next year, because negotiations will start in January, they're already frustrated. They're saying, last time, in October, we were told there would be tough choices that would be made early on, but already they're hearing noises that it isn't going to be the case, that actually things are going to be better over the next 3 years. And that's a really crucial period. All government spending in the run-up to the next election is contained in the next spending review.
Matthew, so many comparisons were made with 1997, but my goodness, this beginning to this Labour government is so different from the sure-touch beginning in 1997. These 4 months have been, well, frankly, catastrophic compared with what happened, all those years ago.
Well, 1997, which, I had hair and hope in 1997. I don't have any hair, but I still just about have some hope. I think 1997 was a completely different inheritance. I think this time around, it's the problem is whoever came in was going to have to balance the books. We saw the Tory clip there in the news saying, 2.5% on defence spending now. That wasn't funded, so the Tories can say it, but then put any money aside for it. In terms of EPNUS, I think the big mistake was the winter fuel allowance, because I think it's a perfectly credible case to make for reducing the winter fuel allowance, taking it away from not just high rate taxpayers, possibly some other people. The fact is the government system the government computer system doesn't allow you to do that, so they had one option, which was either keep it for everybody, take it away just from high rate taxpayers, which wouldn't save that much, or take it away from everybody by the very poorest pensioners. To do that before the budget, with the whole of the summer for it to fester over, I think was a big political mistake, and I think that's what's really shocked Labour MPs and the Labour Party, because they had to spend their summer defending it. On farmers, if you speak to people close to the Treasury, they're quite pleased about what's happened with farmers, partly because it's distracted from the other measures. Because although farmers are sort of popular, there is a little feeling that they're maybe a little bit over the top, that, these are people who are handing on millions of pounds worth of assets, which is more than most families have. Now, I know we can have all the arguments about how special a case there is for farmers, but in terms of public attention, I think that one is regarded as less of a hit than the winter fuel allowance, which is politically, there's no upside to.
I'd like to hear from you each briefly about the CV row. Do you want to start, Matthew? What do you think of it?
Well, look, I've known Rachel since she was 19, before she started on her CV.
You should have written the CV.
I should have written the CV. I went to, her 19th birthday party we were just discussing before we came on air. Look, what happened with the CV is she did do economics at Oxford. She went to the Bank of England as a graduate. She was an economist at the Bank of England. She went to Washington to the embassy on an attachment as an economist. She then went to work for the Halifax because she wanted to live in Yorkshire. Why did she want to live in Yorkshire? Because she was nursing the Leeds seat, which she still represents. She was trying to get selected. So that's why she moved to Yorkshire. It was a bit daft to claim she was an economist at the Halifax, because she was a trained economist who went to work, and she specifically wanted to work in Yorkshire at the Halifax office, not in the London HQ.
Daft is an interesting word. What about dishonest?
Well, she is an economist. She was doing various jobs there, but they hired her because she was an economist. I don't think it's the greatest crime of the century. I wouldn't have done it.
Andrew, what do you make of the CV row?
I think, broadly speaking, I'm on the same page, except for she clearly was an economist. She clearly did study the economy, but it's just a bizarre thing to sort of fumble your CV where you said you're an economist, and then it turns out, I think she was a complaints manager. So I appreciate why she did it and why she was in Leeds and that she has an economics background, but it's just a bizarre thing to sort of even do. And I think that the more you look into it, the more weird it becomes. And I think it has hit her credibility.
Well, Aubrey, it is weird because people who are in public life, their CVs will be examined and they will be called to account. Why be casual with the truth in your CV?
Well, and I think, obviously, she made this quite public change to her LinkedIn profile, which seemed to confirm that perhaps what had previously been advertised as her role wasn't exactly. Now, again, is it the biggest crime of the century? No. But, it's odd to see no Labour ministers, including Rachel Reeves herself, sort of coming out and explaining or vociferously defending her position. They just seem to be sort of sitting back and taking it and keeping stum.
OK, yes or no answer only. Will Rachel Reeves be the Chancellor at the next election, yes or no?
Yes.
I can't see why not.
Yes.
OK, 3 yeses. We shall see. Thank you very much, Aubrey, Barclay, Aubrey, Andrew and Matthew. Coming up, by the way, you're going to be back. We're going to be talking about the International Criminal Court and particularly its moral authority. Coming up, we've got a new book on one of Britain's most famous barristers, Carman QC. It draws on transcripts, letters and personal papers. The author of Get Carman, Karen Phillips, will share with me her memories of this titan of the British bar. This is Sunday with Mike Portillo, only on GBNews.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Often described as a titan of the English bar, George Carman QC was, unusually amongst barristers, almost a household name in a career during which he defended celebrities including Elton John, Ken Dodd and Richard Branson. He became truly famous when he appeared for the former Liberal Party leader Jeremy Thorpe as he faced a charge of conspiracy to murder. My next guest knew George Carman rather intimately. Indeed, he immediately asked her for her hand in marriage when they first met. Karen Phillips knew Carman from 1986 and was a close friend until his death in 2001. Karen has used court transcripts and personal documents to construct her new book, Get Carman. There it is. And here you are. Karen, thank you very much indeed. So you knew him very well, and actually he began to write a little bit of an autobiography just in the weeks before his death. And from those pages, I was struck by the amount of uncertainty that there was about the man. This man who was so confident in court, who charmed juries so famously, but in some ways felt that he was an actor, in some ways felt that he was fighting back nerves and uncertainties. Is that true?
I think he was quite worried about every case. It was much more that he was concerned for the client. He always wanted to do his best. He worked so hard to win a case, not really for his personal satisfaction, but because he didn't want to let people down.
His success rate was extraordinary, and, you know, I'll choose my words carefully here, but shall we say that many people were surprised at the time that Jeremy Thorpe was found not guilty. It was astonishing in the case of Jonathan Aitken, for example, that the principal charge against him, which was that he'd been corrupt in arms dealings, I don't think that was ever actually reached during the court. It seems even more surprising today that people who were employed by Mohammed Fayed were believed in the case of Neil Hamilton. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, his results are extraordinary.
Well, his results are extraordinary, but after all, it was often for the other side to put forward their case. And if he could find a loophole, he would. He was very clever at analysing every single detail of all the cases. He rarely had notes. He absorbed every single matter he possibly could over months before a case would start. And he would know it so well that if there was a gap, he would leap on it.
And he rehearsed. For example, tell us about the concluding speech in the Jeremy Thorpe case.
Yes, well, in that case, he really thought very carefully for months about what to say. And he wanted to come up with a very good line, and he just thought that because Jeremy had been a politician for many, many years and had relied so much on the votes of his constituents, that it would be a very good idea to individually look at every juror and point to them and say, this now comes to be the most important vote of his life. And then to say, your vote really counts, and to point individually at every single juror and say, yours, yours, yours.
12 times?
12 times. And because he had the height of the jurors' eyes, almost, he always would communicate very well with them. They paid a lot of attention to what he said.
He had the right sort of accent as well. You mentioned, for example, that he didn't necessarily speak loudly. Sometimes he spoke softly. His accent was fairly unplaceable, was it? I mean, it was neither one class nor another, neither one place nor another.
Yes, I mean, I think...
Every man.
Yes, I didn't know him, obviously, when he was much younger, and I think he had a bit of a northern accent, but he knocked it out of himself, I think, and going to Balliol, he made a conscious effort.
Where he knew Jeremy Thorpe, who's now on screen, or certainly was a moment ago.
Exactly.
They were in a debate together at Oxford.
They were. In fact, I have the debate paper at home, which is quite funny. Jeremy had asked George to debate, and, of course, it wasn't until 30 years later that they met again when he defended Jeremy Thorpe.
Famously, he wouldn't allow Thorpe to speak in the trial.
Well, I have to say he would deny that he wouldn't allow him to speak.
OK.
I think he was asked about that on Desert Island Discs, and he said that he made the decision, probably himself, that Jeremy should not give evidence. But you can't tell a witness really what to do.
It struck me that some of the skill was not what happened in the courtroom, but rather what happened outside. Now, as an example, in the case of Jonathan Aitken, it was the discovery that his wife and daughter were not in Paris and therefore could not have paid the Ritz hotel bill. That's what made Aitken's case collapse. And that wasn't a bit of courtroom drama. That was a bit of really good research. And I think in the Hamilton case as well, there was never any video evidence, for example, that Hamilton had taken any money. But there was evidence that, quite extraneously, I mean, in different circumstances, he'd been advising the Mobile Oil Company and had taken money for his services. So he was pretty good at bringing bits of evidence which were perhaps, out there somewhere, hidden into the courtroom. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I think the thing is that was his great obsession with detail. He went over every single fact again and again and again. And with Aitken, we discussed it several times. And
You and Carman.
We did. And we discussed that journey. And I must say, I did suggest that that wouldn't have been possible. George looked into it, and of course Jonathan himself, being very thorough, had checked that British Airways wouldn't reveal that information, and somehow it was revealed. And George couldn't believe it because, of course, it came in at the 11th hour like a rabbit out of a hat, as George was accused of frequently producing.
What about the mastery of the turn of phrase in the case of Sonia Sutcliffe, whose husband was a mass murderer. He said that Sonia Sutcliffe, I think, had danced on the graves of her husband's victims.
Yes.
I mean, again, these things were rehearsed, but he understood the importance of the phrase that was going to resonate not only in the courtroom, but in the newspapers as they reported day by day on proceedings.
Yes, I think he thought it was very important to say something that would stick in the mind. And particularly with juries, he thought that it was very important to give them a description, almost with like a child's story, so that they could imagine the situation, and that would help. And I think that phrase, dancing on the graves, was remarkable, because she was quite callous. She said that her husband had actually humanely killed these women. And I think George was absolutely astounded at that.
And one little thing about the fragment that he wrote before he died of autobiography, there's a hint there that he missed out on much in life because he was so obsessive about his work. And he offers that as a warning to others, that if you're as obsessed as he was with his career, you're going to hurt other people.
Yes, I think he reflected very much on his life and regretted in a way that he hadn't had perhaps a lot more fun. But then again, he was so serious about his work, it would have been difficult to do it in any other way, I think.
It's a very interesting book. Going to hold it up again. Get Carman by Karen Phillips. And thank you so much for coming in on a Sunday morning to talk about your excellent book.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we're going to be transported to the alleys of Louisiana as members of the Grammy-winning Dirty Dozen Brass Band join us ahead of the final day of the London Jazz Festival. I hope to see you again shortly. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We still have Storm Bert dominating our weather through today, bringing strong winds, further spells of heavy rainfall, but also some mild air too. So we have a band of rain across the southwestern parts of England. That's moving its way slowly eastwards across the Midlands and gradually into East Anglia. Towards the north of that, though, a much drier picture compared to Saturday, but blustery showers already moving through across parts of Northern Ireland and western part of Scotland. Here temperatures around 10 or 11 degrees, but across the south a very mild picture out there, highs of 15 to 16 degrees. There are warnings in force, rain and wind warnings. We could see gusts up to 70 miles per hour across western parts of Scotland through this evening, with heavy spells of showers and rain. That continuing across Northern Ireland as well, with blustery showers feeding through, gusts here up to 65 miles per hour. Across parts of central England, we still have this band of heavy rain that will gradually start moving its way eastwards through the night, moving into East Anglia and southeastern England. Behind that, turning drier with some clear spells, but some frequent showers. These most frequent across Northern Ireland and into Scotland as well, where we still hold on to some very strong winds as we start Monday morning. But it won't be as mild as we go through Monday morning, lows dipping around 7 or 8 degrees. But it will be a damp start, especially across eastern parts of England, but rain will gradually clear its way through, turning much drier and brighter behind it across the bulk of England. But further towards the west, here we'll see frequent showers moving through, some of these quite heavy, but the main focus will be the strong winds and frequent showers across the north, where they could turn wintry, with temperatures dropping closer to average. Bye-bye for now.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you have to ask what jazz is, you'll never know. So said Louis Armstrong, one of the most influential musicians in history. Born in New Orleans, Armstrong's talent made him an international sensation. His influence is as strong today as in the Roaring '20s. Indeed, this week, the London Jazz Festival has been taking place, and as part of the grand finale, described as a Louisiana-themed bash, happens this evening with the award-winning Dirty Dozen Brass Band performing. Let's take a quick listen to the band.
Dynamic duo is Gerald and Snoop. It's Kobe Shaq 2002 going throw me the oop. He told me pull up to the stew, I'll be there in the coop. Man, it's a bowl of gumbo, we just preparing the soup. Yeah, I bridge the gap, bruh, this is the West. It's only right that greatness happen when bosses connect. I do it all for respect, you do it all for the check. And when I need something from
So, Grammy Award winner Martin Shaw and trumpet player Nick Etwill join me in the studio. Hello, welcome to you both. Thank you very much for popping in, particularly in your Santa outfits, and Nick, in your case, carrying a trumpet as well.
Yes.
You're playing today? What are you playing today?
I'm doing a jazz theatre show called 58th Street in Peckham. It's like an immersive jazz theatre show. It's going on for a couple of months.
Just before I invite you to do a bit of trumpeting for us, a little bit about the importance of Louisiana. I described it as the cradle of jazz. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And the whole thing about coming to Louisiana and New Orleans is experiencing the culture, the legacy, the history, the music. And you have to go and experience it yourself. You can't, we give you a little appetizer.
Yeah.
But the meal is in going.
So how successfully are you able to bring Louisiana to London in the London Jazz Festival?
Well, we sold out the Barbican last night.
Excellent.
And we were told that it was probably the wildest Barbican crowd that they've ever had. There were people dancing all over the place, and we had some great New Orleans players and some royalty. We had 3 Nevilles in the house, and the Neville family is royalty in New Orleans.
Yeah. The Dirty Dozen Brass Band, we heard a little of them just a moment ago, but that sounded like quite a mixture of styles to me. Tell me about what's going on in their music.
Dirty Dozen is the first second-generation, basically brass band. So originally, the brass bands were like the Olympia brass band and a lot of traditional stuff. What Dirty Dozen did was they put modern jazz music in the brass band format, and they were the first to do it. And, you know, you'd hear Miles Davis and Michael Jackson and everything in between within the brass band context. And they were the first. And, by the way, they were Grammy winners with me.
How was that? What was the collaboration called?
It was Stomping Ground by Aaron Neville with the Dirty Dozen Brass Band and the Take Me to the River All-Stars.
Yeah, Take Me to the River. And that title, Take Me to the River, that covered a stage show, but also, what, video material, round-the-world shows?
So we are award-winning films, award-winning records. We won the Grammy last year, and live shows. But we lead with our education. And we have Common Core curriculum that was commissioned by Berklee College of Music in over 3,000 high schools in North America and now coming over here. So we aim to educate this generation and generations to come to make sure they know where their music came from and why it's so important.
That is absolutely fantastic. Nick, you're clutching that trumpet. Would you like to give voice to that trumpet?
I mean, I don't know if I'd like to. It's a bit early for this kind of thing, but I'll give it a whirl.
OK, what are you playing?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Let's see.
Brilliant. When the Saints. Now,
yes.
I mean, give us a bit of context. How does that fit into the history of music? It's a very familiar, but I imagine a pretty important piece of music as well.
It's the quintessential New Orleans tune, you know. When I first went there for Jazz Fest in 2010, went to Preservation Hall, which is one of the old halls that Alan Jaff set up, tuba player, back in the 60s, I think, and his son Ben, bass player, who runs the thing now. And in the back of the room, on the wall, there's a sign saying, you know, request $5. When the Saints, $20, you know, because everyone plays it. It's the most heard tune in New Orleans. It's like, oh, we have to play it again. But it's, you know, the Saints, that's the New Orleans football team. It's the whole thing.
Give us another burst of something.
Well, we got
some Christmas.
Christmas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it wasn't.
Sensational. You put us to shame here because we've not even got our Christmas decorations up yet.
I've had it in the building 4 minutes, but yeah.
I've got my red shoes on, though.
Oh, let's see those. Let's see those. You have led the way for us there, Nick. It's very good of you to come in this morning because you're playing at lunchtime. Where are you playing?
Packham.
Is that part of the London Jazz Festival?
No, it's not. It's just this immersive jazz theatre show. It's been going for a few weeks and it's going to go on for a couple of months. 58th Street. It's fun.
Very good fun.
Yeah.
Martin, talking about educating young people so that they know where their music came from and so on. Are you being successful in the sense that do you feel that jazz is very much alive? Is it in a very healthy state?
Yeah, I think jazz is a misnomer in a way because it's more inclusive than you would think. And funk is part of jazz and jazz is part of rock. So when everything comes together, it's like a gumbo, and that's what Louisiana is. It's a mixture of all different ingredients, mostly influences from around the world. So if you want to see a perfect blend of world music, you come to Louisiana, come to New Orleans.
Nick,
do you want to play us out with about a minute's worth?
A minute's worth? OK. Well,
television.
Sunday morning, let's just take it down a little bit.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. You certainly have lifted our Sunday morning between your jazz and your hats and your shoes. You have brightened things up for us. Thank you very much to Martin Shaw and Nick Epwell. Coming up next, it's the awards season in the publishing industry. First author to have won both the Booker and the Baillie Gifford prizes, Richard Flanagan, has said that he will delay accepting £50,000 in prize money until Baillie Gifford share their plan to reduce its investment in fossil fuel extraction. I'll be speaking to the senior cultural writer at The Telegraph, Liam Kelly. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As Strictly Come Dancing approaches its iconic Blackpool episode, marking halfway through the competition, visually impaired dancers across the country have spoken out about how groundbreaking the casting of Chris McCausland is, who suffers from, if I hope I'm saying this correctly, retinitis pigmentosa, and they have found him particularly inspiring. We've been talking, Sean, about how the casting of Strictly has been inspiring to so many people. But I imagine there'll be lots of people who are watching this at home finding your story of resilience really inspiring, because you've obviously really been through it. Is dancing something that has sort of, you know, helped keep you going through all of those troubles? And what does it mean to you to see casting like this on a show like Strictly Come Dancing?
Like I say, all the things I went through. So those 9 years when I wasn't dancing, you know, I was still dancing in my head and just banging on to other people. Very much not just people with sight loss. You know, I've been a big advocate for people with social isolation. So many people on their own now, social anxiety, especially since COVID. And I just want people to get out. The stuff that I'm doing and all the stuff Chris is obviously doing, it will inspire others. Again, like I say, just not people just with sight loss. I had so many people come up to me in the early days, guys, and now that say, you know what, Shawnee, I've seen you do it, so I'm just going to do it. But you just got to get over yourself, because if you if you bother to do the maths, you know, because all it is maths and walking. Yeah. You know, that's all it is.
Maths and walking actually sounds quite difficult.
Sean, thank you.
Oh, come on, mate. Can you shout? Can you walk? Crack on.
Sean, you're an inspiration. Thank you, mate, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. You're a star, and so glad.
Just before I go, I'm just going to say this is Kev. Here's Kev.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The Booker Prize for Fiction and the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction are two of the publishing industry's most coveted awards. In recent weeks, Samantha Harvey's science fiction novel Orbital scooped the Booker, while Richard Flanagan's memoir Question 7 claimed the Baillie Gifford. Now, that makes Richard Flanagan the first author to have won the two prizes, having previously taken the Booker in 2014. In his acceptance speech for the Baillie Gifford this week, the writer said that while Baillie Gifford's direct investment in fossil fuels extraction is already minimal, he'd like to see it reduced further. He said he will not accept the £50,000 prize until the sponsor shares a plan to continue to reduce such investments. Baillie Gifford's sponsorship of companies that extract fossil fuels has sparked protests during the past few years, with the Hay Festival suspending its receipt of sponsorship. With me now is senior culture writer at The Telegraph, Liam Kelly. Liam, great to see you. The first thing that one might say is that if places like Hay, if festivals are refusing to take money from Baillie Gifford, or indeed from anybody else who's considered to be impure, the most likely result of that is the collapse of festivals.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Baillie Gifford sponsored 10 literary festivals until this year. Hay, Cheltenham, places like that. I suspect a lot of them may struggle to put the festival on this year because it's a huge financial undertaking.
And on the face of it, why has Baillie Gifford done so much sponsorship of literature?
Well, if you listen to Baillie Gifford, it's because they just have a huge love of books, basically. I spoke to the Baillie Gifford partner who gave the prize to Richard Flanagan at the awards on Tuesday, and he was saying that basically he's a book nerd. If you go to their office in the city, it's full of books. It's like a 18th century library or something. You know, they say they're a responsible investor, and sponsoring book prizes is good for culture and therefore sort of good for everyone.
Yes, so there appears to be an absolutely genuine love of literature in there. Have you been able to research to what extent they are invested in fossil fuels? Yeah,
so they're quite open about this, actually. They have quite a small... They invest a lot of money from pension funds and so on. They have quite small stakes in companies that extract fossil fuels, sort of FTSE 100 companies like Shell or BP, for instance. But they're also one of the biggest investors in Tesla, for instance. And that means that they're part of the, transition to electric cars. That is, a really positive step if you're sort of got the climate in mind, I suppose.
But also the thing that slightly puzzles me is I don't know of anybody who thinks that we could do without fossil fuels today. I dare say that Mr. Flanagan travels in a car sometimes that's powered by fossil fuels, or has been on a diesel train, or has been on a plane, or possibly some of his electricity has been generated from gas or oil.
Yeah, and to be fair to Richard Flanagan, he sort of admits to being a hypocrite in this. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, I mean that in the sense that he, as you say, drives a car, takes a plane, what have you. His point, I think, wasn't we need to be rid of them immediately. He was actually quite nuanced with what he said. But you're right, there's no way to turn off fossil fuels overnight. That would just be disastrous.
Let's take it more broadly, because I know you've looked at this. BP was a big sponsor of a number of cultural institutions. Where do we stand on that now? Who got rid of BP and who kept BP?
Most places, to be honest, got rid of BP. They sponsored the National Portrait Gallery's annual prize. They sponsored the Royal Opera House. Those deals have ended. It has been interesting in the last year or so that companies and institutions have been, I think, a little bit more willing to forcefully say, look, to the protesters, say, that what they're doing is good. They are being a bit more forceful. They're not falling over as much. The management of the sponsor and the management of the institution. So the British Museum accepted £50 million from BP at the end of last year.
50 million?
50, yeah.
Not small
huge.
Change, is it? No.
They need to raise £1 billion, so they can't really say no to a company like BP if they're saying, here's 50 million. And they were quite, forthright in saying, this is worth doing.
This may be beyond the research you've done, but I'm just wondering, institutions like Covent Garden that have refused money that they were offered, has that led them into greater difficulties? Does it make other investors more reluctant? I mean, I do give money to the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, but I must say I'm not particularly impressed by an institution that wants me to give money but has refused somebody else's good money.
Yeah, and I think when you're sort of talking on the scale that you're giving or what have you, that's definitely one thing. But I suppose the bigger issue will be if you are a large company that's, got 10, 15, 20 million pounds to spend on the arts, would you bother, I suppose? Because, there's all of a sudden you can turn around and say, oh, well, we don't want your money anymore. You're impure. You're not, woke enough, whatever. We'll turn the money down. That becomes a big PR own goal, and you just keep the money, really.
Yes, and do you feel that the people who are pressing this fairly militantly are quite a small minority? In the case of the Literature Prize, who was it who was making the running?
So the people who were making the running on that was a quite small fringe group of left-wing activists who call themselves fossil-free books. They were unhappy with Baillie Gifford investing in fossil fuels, as well as companies like Amazon and Google that do work with the Israeli military. They are very much a fringe, but they're a noisy fringe, and I think book festivals and that sort of thing struggle when there is bad PR, basically.
In the particular case of Baillie Gifford, it comes up for renewal fairly soon, and there's nothing special about that. I mean, these things are agreed for a period, and then they have to be reviewed and generally renewed. Do you think it will be renewed? What's the mood music going on there?
I actually think that either despite or actually because of Richard Flanagan and what he said this week, it's more likely that they will renew their sponsorship than not, because it's got people, you and I are talking about Baillie Gifford right now, right? We probably wouldn't be if Richard Flanagan had not said his piece.
And do you think it will lead to a change of policy by Baillie Gifford? Will they do what they're being asked, which is provide a plan to move faster out of fossil fuel?
I think they already have a plan. I think they don't really need to do what activists tell them to do. And, to be honest, if they don't provide a public plan soon, the only person who will suffer for that is Richard Flanagan, because there'll be £50,000 sat in Baillie Gifford's bank account that he won't be getting.
Very, very interesting. There'll be lots more of this.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for reporting on it. Thank you, Liam. Well, that concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Please stay with me. My panel is going to return, and we're going to be debating whether the International Criminal Court has the moral authority and indeed the legal competence to indict Benjamin Netanyahu and one other member of the Israeli government. And should a banana, which has been duct taped to a wall, be worth almost £5 million? I'll investigate Ukraine's use of Storm Shadow missiles against targets in Russia, and I'll bring you the latest instalment of my Taste of Britain series, which is going to be about Italian food. Please rejoin me at noon this Sunday with Michael Portillo.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Storm Bert continues to give strong winds, outbreaks of heavy rain across parts of the country, and it's exceptionally mild for some as well, 16, 17 Celsius this Sunday morning. Bert sat to the northwest, tightly packed isobars indicating strong winds across the country and heavy rain in places too. Rain particularly heavy across southwest England into parts of Wales, the Midlands, into eastern England as well through the day ahead. To the southeast of this, some bright or sunny spells behind it as well. Some dry interludes before we see blustery showers across Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland. Here the winds gusting by the afternoon 60, 70 miles an hour. Elsewhere as well, gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour possible. So an unsettled afternoon to come, and temperatures well above where they should be for the time of year. So let's take a look at that rain for the evening time. For those travelling, there could be some local disruption across central southern parts of England and Wales. Flooding becoming a real concern. Brighter skies across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland as the sun sets here, clearer spells, and then a mixture of blustery showers, strong winds across the northwest of Scotland. Temperatures here 9 to 11 Celsius. Stays wet and windy into the evening and overnight as well. This weather system only slowly pushes its way southeastwards, transferring into southeast England during the early hours. Elsewhere, blustery showers continue to move in as the storm system only slowly pushes its way eastwards, and showers still pretty relentless across the northwest. Temperatures coming down here overnight, 6 or 7 Celsius, still mild in the south, 9 or 10 degrees. Weather system gives some rain initially across southeast England. This starts to clear away, it brightens up, but a blustery day for everyone. Sunny spells, scattered showers. Showers most frequent across the north and the west, and some colder air starting to return across Scotland. We'll see the showers turn back to snow here. Temperatures 6-7 degrees, cooler in the south as well, highs of 11.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. The poet William Blake told us to think in the morning and act in the noon. But we have another hour of provocative thought ahead of us on Sunday with Michael Portillo. Please continue to keep me company. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and one other Israeli leader, alleging that war crimes have been committed. I'll see whether my panel considers the court to be morally entitled and legally competent to bring such charges against a country that was attacked by Hamas 13 months ago. The art world was taken by storm this week after a banana duct-taped to a wall, a piece by artist Mauricio Catalan, was sold for nearly £5 million. Art critic Estelle Lovett will talk to me about that and other artistic controversies. This week, Ukraine launched British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles into Russia for the first time. Former military intelligence officer Philip Ingram will join me to explain what's happening and how the conflict may develop. And in the latest instalment of my Taste of Britain series, head chef at Hythe and Seek, Fabio De Paulis, will join me live in the studio to discuss his love of Italian cuisine. Before all of that, your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories, well, another weather alert has been issued and more than 200 flood alerts in place in the UK as Storm Bert continues to sweep across the country. The Met Office says there's potential for fast-flowing or deep floodwater to cause danger to life today after heavy downpours and strong winds battered much of the country. Well, a major incident has now been declared in parts of South Wales due to river flooding. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. We are hearing that homes and cars are underwater there. A yellow wind warning has come into force for large parts of England, with gusts of up to 65 miles per hour expected in some places. A man died yesterday morning after a tree fell onto his car due to the weather conditions. 2 other people died yesterday in crashes on the roads due to the stormy weather, one in West Yorkshire and another in Northamptonshire, although it's not known if they were directly related to the conditions. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall says NATO countries are involved in a hidden cyber war with Russia. That as the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster will warn that Russia could turn the lights off and won't think twice about exploiting defence gaps in the UK. Pat McFadden is expected to give the warning to NATO members next week. In a speech, he'll urge countries to bolster cyber security and not underestimate the threat of cyber warfare from Russia. It follows warnings from experts last night who urged Britain to remain firm and stand strong against Vladimir Putin's threats. Shadow Levelling Up Secretary Kevin Hollinrake told GB News that Labour need to increase the UK's defence spending now.
One of the highest spenders in NATO, constantly have been, but we recognise there are growing threats around the world, and that's why we committed to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. And that is a commitment not matched by the Labour government. They've made some kind of general commitment to get there at some point in the future, but the threat is now, and we should bolster our defences now. We made that firm commitment. Labour should do the same.
Elsewhere, the Justice Secretary says the state should never offer death as a service. Shabana Mahmood made those comments in a strongly worded intervention over the assisted dying bill ahead of an historic Commons vote next week. In a letter to constituents, Ms Mahmood said she was profoundly concerned by the legislation, not just for religious reasons, but because it could create a slippery slope towards death on demand. She's previously made clear she would vote against the bill, alongside Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who faced a backlash after suggesting the changes would cost the NHS more. A group of faith leaders have signed a letter opposing the bill ahead of its debate by MPs. Sir Keir Starmer has declined to say whether he will back the bill, arguing that he doesn't want to pressure MPs. Chief Executive of Labour Together, Jonathan Ashworth, told GB News it's not a good idea.
There were 2 things that would concern me. First of all, I just worry about the pressure that this would put people who are in the most desperate of circumstances, the pressure they would be under. I just think it would change societal norms about that, and I'm not sure that we're ready for that as a society. And secondly, we all know that end-of-life care in the country is just not satisfactory. The hospice movement are phenomenal, but they have been underfunded for years. And I just don't want people feeling that they are a burden or that they feel their time is up and they have to make these decisions.
Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has called a financial package for developing nations a critical 11th hour deal at the 11th hour for the climate as the United Nations Environmental Conference drew to a close. Delegates at COP29 in Azerbaijan agreed a new climate finance target. They pledged $300 billion a year, that's £239.5 billion, to help poorer countries deal with the impacts of climate change, with rich countries leading the payments. It was feared the conference would collapse after some of the poorest nations had walked out of the talks. US President Joe Biden said that while substantial work remained to be done, the conference had set an ambitious international climate finance goal. However, the African group of negotiators have described it as too little, too late. And Novak Djokovic has appointed Andy Murray to coach him into and through the Australian Open. Announcing the collaboration, Djokovic said he's excited to have one of his greatest rivals on the same side of the net. In a video posted on X, the Serbian said, "We had some of the most epic battles in our sport. I thought our story was over, but it turns out it has one final chapter. Three-time Grand Slam winner Andy Murray retired in August after exiting the men's doubles at the Paris Olympics. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you very much, Tatiana Sanchez. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister and one other Israeli former minister alleging war crimes. A spokesman for Sir Keir Starmer has said that the government respects the independence of the ICC, which is the primary international institution for investigating and prosecuting the most serious crimes of international concern. What does my panel make of those announcements? Joining me once again, policy fellow at the think tank Onward, Andrew Barclay, chief political correspondent of The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, and former Labour advisor Matthew Lazar. Welcome back, everyone. Matthew, I have a problem with international law. I understand national law, made by parliaments, it's written down, national courts adjudicate. What is the source of international law?
Well, that's a very good question, because the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which has issued the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the other Israeli former minister, is actually a fairly recent invention. It basically started in the 90s, and it was particularly, it was actually initiated by Trinidad and Tobago, who thought that the world needed a criminal court. So we would have the International Court of Justice, which is the UN court, which doesn't prosecute individuals, so that's to settle disputes between states, which is within the UN apparatus. So the ICC, the problem with the ICC is that not every country by any stretch of the imagination is a member. And if you look at a world map, it's basically Europe, Africa, and South and Latin America, together with Australia and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, that are the members. So there's a huge number of countries, particularly in Asia and the United States. So China's not a member, India's not a member. So where does its moral authority come from when it's not part of the global apparatus that is the UN? It was particularly, there's been a big controversy that African nations at the moment think that it has been overly harsh on African countries, because it's spent most of its time prosecuting war crimes in some of the more vicious wars we've seen, like the Rwandan conflict, which is one of the things that got the moral impetus for it in the 90s.
Aubrey, what did you make of the statement on behalf of the Prime Minister that the British government accepts the impartiality of the court? There might be quite a lot of British citizens who do no such thing, who don't accept its impartiality.
No, and in fact, when you compare the response from Keir Starmer to the initial reaction back in the spring, when the ICC announced that it was sort of planning this measure and it was opening this case, Rishi Sunak was much more sort of full-throated in criticising the ICC for sort of straying into this area and what he called the moral equivalence of opening a case that involved both Hamas and Israel. And here we have the Prime Minister's spokesperson seeming to sort of equivocate and not answer questions about whether or not Netanyahu would be arrested if he came to the UK. And that, of course, creates a domestic problem for the Prime Minister, but also an international one as well. Because as Matthew was saying, the US are certainly much more critical of this decision. Joe Biden was. I mean, imagine how much more critical Donald Trump will be as well. Keir Starmer's really keen not to sort of be too isolated from the US, but ultimately this is going to create an issue with Donald Trump. It might mean that Israel ends up more isolated on the world stage. And so the government has found itself in a really difficult position because of the equivocating by Number 10.
I haven't mentioned that the court has issued an arrest warrant for one Hamas leader, although it is a leader that we presume to be dead. Andrew, what has been your reaction to this? Take us from the very beginning. How do you feel about international law?
Well, I think it's as Matthew said. It's there's a question around its authority in some ways. I think it's an absurd decision to sort of draw moral equivalence between a democratically elected leader who is defending his people versus an international terrorist organisation of Hamas who is trying to eradicate those people. And so I think, there's other countries like Germany, the US, Hungary who have rejected this outright. And I think that that's probably should have been the right approach from Starmer and Lamy to sort of reject this outright rather than endorse it. And as you said, I don't think there's a lot of people who feel that this court is aligned with where we are as a nation. And I think when you step back and you look at a lot of these international bodies that have been set up probably with the best of intentions, whether it's the ICC or the WHO or the UN, it feels like there is this sort of undertone at the moment of anti-Western sort of sentiment creeping through. And that feels like it's out of lockstep with where
the US is going, with where the incoming Trump administration is going, and with where Britain should be going?
Matthew, although I've been so sceptical about international law, I do see some uses for it. And, because I was involved in Bosnia, for example, I've seen men, nearly all men, I think, brought to justice for crimes that they've committed in war zones. So I'm not against it altogether. I just wonder, what's going on in this particular case. And I think Andrew has raised the question of counterproductivity. I mean, it's all very well bringing forth this judgment, which I dare say will be applauded in many quarters. Lots of people will be very happy that indictments are being brought against Israeli leaders. But could it signal the end of the court? I mean, the United States is likely to take this very badly indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the court's future, will hang in the balance if signatories like Germany and Hungary that actually are members of the court reject it, because effectively then the system is collapsing. I think one of the pressures within the court has been to see that it was treating, so-called Western, I think basically, white country like Israel in the broadest sense, in the same way that it's been treating countries in Africa, which is one of the because they're the biggest voting bloc within the court are the African nations, because they're the largest number of people. But in terms of the response here, it's very difficult, because we'll also remember General Pinochet was wanted not by the international court, was wanted via the Spanish courts in the late 1990s. And when he came to Britain, would he be arrested? I think he was receiving medical treatment here. Was he going to be arrested? That was a major political controversy. I mean, the counter-argument is we are a signatory, we're in it. If we're going to be a member of it, we have to respect by its decisions. In fact, if Netanyahu came here, he wouldn't be arrested the moment he set foot on British soil, because a British court would have to actually process it and decide whether it wanted to issue an arrest warrant. So, although it's it's effectively, it's like an extradition treaty. The British court would have to be that extra check on it before anybody is put in handcuffs.
Aubrey, I must say, if I were advising the British government, one of the things I say to them is be careful where this thing goes next. I mean, all the years ago when I was Secretary of State for Defence, I remember that I was being warned, and the Prime Minister, John Major, was being warned that if we took certain decisions, military decisions, that led to people's deaths, then we could in due course be indicted if the manner in which we'd arrived at those decisions was held somewhere by someone to be unlawful. As I say, that's the best part of 30 years ago, and this thing has developed much further since. And one of the reasons the United States will worry about this is that the ICC, under the last Trump administration, began some sort of inquiry into the United States' activities in Afghanistan. The United States reacted very strongly against it, and that investigation came to an end.
And I suspect that part of the reason that actually this might have a different effect is that there are countries that felt that the ICC was almost rigged against them, or it had some sort of particular axe to grind. And so this judgment might help sort of increase buy-in or support amongst some of the countries who are supportive of the recommendation. But it is just likely to sort of further disintegrate the kind of international Western coalition behind it, given the sorts of countries we've just talked about who are supportive of it. Now, obviously, we hear from Number 10 that they are probably going to seek some form of legal advice from the Attorney General about how to respond. Practically speaking, it won't have a great deal of significance, because I don't think anybody expects that the second Benjamin Netanyahu touches down in the UK that he would be arrested. But again, it's about the message it sends. It's about the question of whether or not the UK should support it or be much more critical than as it has been in the past.
Andrew, being counterproductive could also occur in a second sense, which is, I mean, supposing for the moment that the ICC intends to hasten on the peace process, if Netanyahu has been indicted, if an arrest warrant has been issued against him, if he now has to question what places he can travel to on the globe in case he's going to be arrested, these are all good reasons why he might wish to hunker down and be less keen even on peace than he's been until now. It's also quite likely that this will arouse quite a lot of sympathy for him in Israel, where sympathy has often been lacking. So my question is, could it be counterproductive in that sense too?
Yeah, well, I think, as Aubrey said, I think it's probably going to appease some of the, especially in the Labour Party, their approach to it. It's probably going to appease some quarters but it's equally going to alienate a lot of people and alienate them away from this international body that's been set up with good intention. And I think we're treating Netanyahu in the same way we're treating Putin, which is, can he even travel? What does that do to our diplomatic relations? Would he even want to come to Britain now after we've sort of half-heartedly suspended arms sales but not done it fully, and, you know, we don't really understand what our foreign policy actually is? It feels more like sort of student politics approach at a very serious time where we should be, regardless of what you think about him as a leader, we should be standing behind Israel and with the United States.
Matthew, why did number 10 have to say anything at all? There are enough difficulties already with the upcoming Trump administration without being absolutely at loggerheads. I mean, coming out and saying that they've no doubt about the impartiality of the court. I mean, as I said before, many people think that statement is weird.
Yeah, I think one of the driving factors behind that might be the Prime Minister himself. It's not a case where the spokesperson just feels they have to say something. Because of his legal background, remember that he was a human rights lawyer for a long time, before he went to become Director of Public Prosecutions, that I think this may come from the Prime Minister's heart, that he believes that Britain should be a member of the ICC, and therefore he believes that Britain has to stand by its decisions and has to stand by the court. I suspect that's a core belief for him. What's interesting is that the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has been much more limited in what she said. She won't be drawn on what would happen if Netanyahu did visit the UK, etc. So it's interesting that this is coming very much from number 10 and probably from the Starmer himself.
Thank you very much indeed, all of you. Fascinating discussion. Andrew Barclay, Aubrey Allegretti and Matthew Lazar. Up next, a banana duct-taped to a wall. A piece of art by Maurizio Catalan was sold for nearly £5 million this week. Art critic Estelle Lovett will give me her reaction. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail now, Josh, and pub landlords have to worry about more than the optics when it comes to offensive banter,
This is a really big story and important. Pub landlords could have to become banter cops to stop themselves being sued by staff offended by comments from customers under workers' rights reform. So, Labour, when they were part of their election process, they were like, we're going to reform workers' rights, and that all sounds good on paper, but there were issues in terms of how might it affect employees and fear from employees costing them more money. One of these things that they're sort of pushing through, though, is that in the Equality Act of 2010, part of the issue was that if you were offended at work or someone said something sexist or racist, something that affected you, the employer had to take some sort of, they had three chances to kind of take action.
Yeah.
Now, the employer should have taken action already. So employees can sue employers. Now, this has a big impact on us because we're comics and we perform in venues. And if some of the bar staff hear a joke that they don't like, then they can sue their employer, potentially, under this legislation.
So it's not punters?
Well, also, it could be like you're at a bar and some bloke is like, oh, I like that top, or whatever. That's not good behaviour. But the point is now that employee could sue their employer.
So, because, I mean, the sort of scenario I was imagining was that a barmaid was being maybe sexually harassed or
That's
something.
what they're focusing in this article, but other articles have gone down the free speech route. Okay. And also venues and universities having lectures. We saw it at, in Edinburgh Fringe Festival and Sadowitz. He had a show cancelled not because of any punters, but because two of the 18-year-olds were working. They were upset by his
There was
wedding.
a bar in Brighton, wasn't there? There was a story we covered a few weeks ago. A bar in Brighton threw some people out because...
They had turfs on the...
turfs. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The art world was taken by storm this week after cryptocurrency entrepreneur Justin Sun spent $6.2 million, £4.9 million, on a banana duct taped to a wall, a piece of art by artist Mauricio Catalan. Other artwork has recently caused controversy. A portrait of the British computer scientist Alan Turing by the world's first ultra-realistic robot artist, that is to say, ADAR, sold at auction for almost $1.1 million. Joining me now to talk about these latest hoo-has is art critic and mentor at the University of Arts London, Estelle Lovett. Estelle, how lovely to see you. Welcome to GB News. I have a feeling that in the case of the banana, it's quite a lot to do with the buyer. Now, you've researched the buyer a little bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Justin Sun?
Yes, so he's a very wealthy cryptocurrency dealer. And of course, you know, everything now is AI and FTs, and it's the way that money's going, and it's very good publicity for him. So obviously, you know, he's not daft. But what makes this banana so unusual is, and it has, as you say, taken the art world by storm. It is the current spectacle, and what's amazing is that even during these very difficult times, the art market still manages to spend big on a significant fuss. Why has it created this fuss? Well, don't forget, the winning bid just happened in a matter of minutes. It took Justin Sun minutes to beat 6 other rivals, so they've all got mega bucks in their pocket. But you know, it's conceptual art at its best, and sometimes with conceptual art, what's more important than the finished piece is the idea. Now, Michael, if I present you with these bananas, yes, obviously they're not worth the $6.2 million, because I haven't said I'm an artist, I haven't said this is an artwork, and I haven't placed it in a gallery or an art fair. But why is it called comedian? It's actually very clever, and it gives you something to think about. So it may be absurd and droll, but it makes you look, think and question. And the question that we ask is, why is it called comedian? Well, first of all, comedian is meant to be something funny. And when we think about a banana or slipping on a banana skin, it's the classic device for humour. Like the Funny On Carry On films with Sid James and Barbara Windsor, yeah? But we've also got Andy Warhol with the Velvet Underground vinyl covers. We've also got the phallic double entendre. We've also got the fact that we know that when bananas grow, they're grown, and it's known as a hand of bananas. So if there's one banana, and that's a finger, yeah, so you can read into it, you know, whatever you want. It's disrupted the art world. It's very clever. Is it value for money? Is it the price that it's worth? Only in someone else's eyes, and those eyes belong to Justin Sun. And yeah, he's got great publicity for what he does.
Estelle, that's all very, very interesting. And you've kind of forestalled me. I was thinking, I'm totting up all the virtues that you've listed, but it still hasn't come, in my book, to £4.9 million. But you do say, do you, that this is a valuable piece of conceptual art?
It is, in as much as that it is a diverting tactic. It makes you think about what's going on and our attitude to life, as odd as that may sound. You know, so it's really telling us, are we going to think about artists who are perhaps no longer struggling to eat in their garret? Are we going to think about capitalism? Are we going to think about our world? Are we going to have people that now saying, well, this is cruelty to bananas? Are we going to have people that are saying, well, why can't I just stick my banana up on the wall? It may entice them to make a new work of art, but the reason they can't stick it up on their own banana up on the wall, or I can't do it, and it's not because it's cruelty to bananas, but it's because it's been done before. In the same way that Duchamp's men's urinal, which he turned on its side, and now it's called Fountain, and that changed the course of art history. We've got a glass of water by artist Michael Craig Martin, which he says is more than a glass of water. See it as an oak tree.
OK.
What about... Sorry?
I said OK. I just wondered whether we could turn to the other controversy of recent times, the piece of art, the portrait of Alan Turing, that was done supposedly by AI, by a robot. One of the controversies there was it wasn't very clear how much the robot had done and how much had been added by people who were not robots. What did you think of that one as a work of art?
Well, that's really interesting. First of all, let's talk about that, whether it was done by the metal claws of Ada, the female robot artist. You know, if you think back to some of the greatest portrait painters, Gainsborough and Reynolds, Michael, you know as well as I do, it was not Gainsborough and Reynolds or Sickert or Sargent that would paint your portrait from start to finish. They would have their minions, their entourage, their helpers, their assistants. One of those artists would start it, and then one of those artists would tweak it and tidy up the portrait, okay? So that is not the problem. The problem I find is that, especially when you're doing a work of art that's a portrait, if it's not done by another human being, it lacks that energy, passion and soul that one person brings to another.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But just looking at the portraits which are on screen at the moment, do you happen to think they're any good?
Listen, it's like asking which artwork is better. Is a Rubens in oil paint on canvas in a gilt frame better than a Tracy Emin unmade bed? You know, they're both relevant to their time. Personally, would I want it? Maybe I would want it only for the reason that it's the first one that's been sold at auction for this price. It's like when the camera was invented in 1839 and everybody said, oh, painting's dead now, the photographer, long live the photographer. And of course that didn't happen, but it's the first, it's the newest. So you're not only buying this work of art, and you do need a damn big wall to hang it on, you're not only buying the work of art, but you are also buying your place forevermore in the art world.
Just back to Mr. Justin's son, who bought the banana. You talked about generating publicity. £4 million, £5 million is not probably very much money to him. Do you think he's invested well? Do you think it's worth that sort of publicity? And why does he need it?
So I wonder if he's paid in hard green notes or in cryptocurrency. I'm not sure. Why does he need it? Because we're all talking about him. The world over. We're talking about the disruptor of the art world, Catalan, and we're talking about the other disruptor, Donald Trump. And that's the only thing we're talking about. The also important word here is disruptor. You know, it's become part of our language now in the last few weeks because of what's going on worldwide. And why does Son need it? What's wrong with being spoken about? You know, it's doing his brand good.
Estelle Lover, it's been great having you on, and thank you very much for those very powerful and interesting opinions.
Thank you.
Coming up next, Ukraine launched Storm Shadow missiles, which had been supplied by Britain into Russia for the first time. Former military intelligence officer Philip Ingram will join me to explain the battlefield. Before that, more news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Michael, thank you very much. And we start this news bulletin with some breaking news that the Metropolitan Police says a man is fighting for his life following a stabbing on Westminster Bridge in central London. The force was called to the scene at around 10:45 this morning to report of a fight and found a man with a stab injury who was taken to hospital in critical condition. 3 people have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and another has been arrested on suspicion of a fray. 2 of those arrested were taken to hospital with minor facial injuries. It's understood the incident is not being treated as terror-related. Elsewhere, another weather alert has been issued and more than 200 flood alerts are in place in the UK as Storm Bert continues to sweep across the country. The Met Office says there's potential for fast-flowing or deep floodwater to cause danger to life today after heavy downpours and strong winds battered much of the country. Well, a major incident has now been declared in parts of South Wales due to river flooding. We'll bring you more as we get it. We are hearing that homes and cars are underwater there. A yellow wind warning's come into force as well for large parts of England, with gusts of up to 65 miles per hour expected in some places. A man died yesterday morning after a tree fell on his car due to those weather conditions. 2 other people died yesterday in crashes on the roads during the stormy weather, one in West Yorkshire and another in Northamptonshire, although it's not known if they were directly related to the conditions. Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall says NATO countries are involved in a hidden cyber war with Russia. That as the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster will warn that Russia could turn the lights off and won't think twice about exploiting defence gaps in the UK. Pat McFadden is expected to give the warning to NATO members next week. In a speech, he'll urge countries to bolster cybersecurity and not underestimate the threat of cyber warfare from Russia. It follows warnings from experts last night who urged Britain to remain firm and stand strong against Vladimir Putin's threats. And the Justice Secretary says the state should never offer death as a service. Shabana Mahmood made the comments in a strongly worded intervention over the assisted dying bill ahead of an historic Commons vote next week. In a letter to constituents, Ms Mahmood said she was profoundly concerned by the legislation, not just for religious reasons, but also because it could create a slippery slope towards death on demand. She's previously made clear she would vote against the bill alongside Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who faced a backlash after suggesting the changes would cost the NHS more. A group of faith leaders have signed a letter opposing the bill ahead of its debate by MPs. Sir Keir Starmer's declined to say whether he will back the bill, arguing he doesn't want to pressure MPs. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Storm Bert continues to give strong winds, outbreaks of heavy rain across parts of the country, and it's exceptionally mild for some as well, 16, 17 Celsius this Sunday morning. Bert sat to the northwest, tightly packed isobars indicating strong winds across the country and heavy rain in places too. Rain particularly heavy across southwest England into parts of Wales, the Midlands, into eastern England as well through the day ahead. To the southeast of this, some bright or sunny spells behind it as well. Some dry interludes before we see blustery showers across Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland. Here the winds gusting by the afternoon 60, 70 miles an hour. Elsewhere as well, gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour possible. So an unsettled afternoon to come and temperatures well above where they should be for the time of year. So let's take a look at that rain for the evening time. For those travelling, there could be some local disruption across central southern parts of England and Wales. Flooding becoming a real concern. Brighter skies across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland as the sun sets here, clearer spells, and then a mixture of blustery showers, strong winds across the northwest of Scotland. Temperatures here 9 to 11 Celsius. Stays wet and windy into the evening and overnight as well. This weather system only slowly pushes its way southeastwards, transferring into southeast England during the early hours. Elsewhere, blustery showers continue to move in as the storm system only slowly pushes its way eastwards, and showers still pretty relentless across the northwest. Temperatures coming down here overnight, 6 or 7 Celsius, still mild in the south, 9 or 10 degrees. Weather system gives some rain initially across southeast England. This starts to clear away, it brightens up, but a blustery day for everyone. Sunny spells, scattered showers. Showers most frequent across the north and the west, and some colder air starting to return across Scotland. We'll see the showers turn back to snow here. Temperatures 6, 7 degrees. Cooler in the south as well, highs of 11.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Senior military sources in Ukraine told the media on Friday that Ukraine's launch against targets in Russia of Storm Shadow missiles supplied by Britain had been very successful. With me now is Philip Ingram, a former military intelligence officer who served in the British Army for over 26 years and left as a colonel. Philip, great to see you. Thank you for joining me on GB News.
Good to see you.
I don't know how many Storm Shadows Britain and France have. I don't know how many we've supplied. Help me to understand how significant this weapon can be in the quantities that can be supplied.
Well, it's not in the public domain how many have been supplied and how many we hold in stock, but I think the production lines are working very fast indeed. It's an Anglo-French missile with American components in it. The hold-up was the Americans giving permission for those military components to be used inside Russia. It's been used by the Ukrainians for many months now against targets in occupied Ukraine. They are significant in that it's an extended range capability that can attack Russian targets in territories that they thought were safe beforehand because they're inside Russian territory. They're not going to be a game changer by themselves, but every additional weapon system that allows Ukraine to push the Russians further back and push their military headquarters, their logistic bases and everything else further back will have an impact on what's going on the front lines.
As far as we know, are we and the Americans, the French, still imposing restrictions on the geography within which they can be used?
From what I've read, and again, there's a lot of lack of detail out there about this, but from what I've read and been told is that the restrictions are against those Russian troops that are potentially going to interdict the Ukrainian troops that are in the occupied Kursk region of Russia. I don't think there's been given blanket permission to use the weapon systems anywhere inside Russia. Now, they're range limited anyway, but I think the interpretation of them and the target-rich environment that's there will give the Ukrainians plenty of opportunity to show them to their true effect.
Yes, but the Russians are not restricted in the places from which they can launch attacks. They can launch attacks from places that are quite far from the theatre of battle. And one might say that unless the Ukrainians are going to be allowed to operate against the places from which the missiles and the planes are being launched, that's going to be a big limitation on the utility of this weapon.
Yeah. Oh, you've hit the nail on the head. You know, the Ukrainians should be given freedom to use the weapons against any military target that can have an impact on what the Russians are doing inside Ukraine, no matter where they're located geographically. We're seeing the Ukrainians having some success with their special operations executive type operations against military airfields and manufacturing sites and oil refineries and everything else. We're seeing them have some success with their drones. We've seen them have real success with their sea drones in sinking 25% of the Russian Black Sea fleet and putting another 25% out of action. But the restrictions are causing the Ukrainians some real problems. I understand this Storm Shadow attack, the first one that happened, hit a Russian command headquarters that was coordinating the bringing in of the North Korean troops and them attacking into the Ukrainians inside Kursk, and was very successful in killing a number of senior Russian officers, North Korean officers, and I understand from anecdotal reporting, wounding one of the North Koreans' most senior officers that are there. So that's sent them a very, very clear message, I think.
That is very interesting. Sir Richard Dearlove was on with Camilla earlier, and he was to some extent poo-pooing the significance of bringing in the North Koreans. I think his argument was that it was going to be very difficult to join the North Korean troops up with the Russian troops in an effective movement. But clearly the Ukrainians have prioritised hitting that link.
Oh, very much so, because it's sending a clear message out to the wider element of the international community that gives Putin tacit support, that you do come in with capability and we will hit you and we will cause problems there. It would be extremely difficult integrating the North Korean troops into the Russian actions, not just because of the language barriers, but because of different levels of training and understanding and different tactics that are using. But it shows a level of desperation that the Russians have got if they're having to bring North Korean troops, not just North Korean ammunition in. And I wouldn't want to be standing beside an artillery piece if you put a North Korean shell in it and are pulling the toggle to fire it. I wouldn't trust it not to go off in the barrel. And this really shows how desperate Putin is. And we've seen discussion of him getting troops from North Africa, Yemeni troops and troops from Central Africa coming in as well. He's not in as strong a position as he likes the West to try and believe he is.
A comment about politics, please. There were some who were close to Donald Trump who were saying that it was kind of outrageous that Biden, in his last days in office, had upped the ante in this way. On the other hand, I would have thought that this would suit Donald Trump pretty well. The fact is that the Ukrainians have been strengthened. He wants, presumably Trump, he wants to see a reasonable balance between Russia and Ukraine before he motions them towards the negotiating table. So do you think that actually, whatever Trump's supporters may be saying, what Biden has done in his last days suits Trump pretty well?
Oh, I think it does, and it wouldn't surprise me if Trump's team were behind it and went to Biden's team and said, can you make this decision so that President Trump doesn't have to? And that gives him more wiggle room when it comes to negotiations. I'm not a Trump supporter in any way, shape or form, but I took my looking at things with my heart and started to put my head on about 6 months ago. And actually, I think the rhetoric we're hearing out of President Zelensky and that Trump may not be as bad for Ukraine as people are saying. I'm starting to believe that. And it's interesting. I think Zelensky is playing the Trump game very, very carefully. Putin will entrench himself and not give anything up for negotiation. That will force Trump into a position to try and show Putin or give Putin a lesson. And we've had this backwards and forwards where there's been a phone call between Trump and Putin that Putin's team has denied. Then immediately after that, we get Melania Trump's naked pictures plastered all over Russian television. Then we get the ATACMS Storm Shadow, and the Russian response is an intermediate range ballistic missile being fired, a game of my missile's bigger than your missile. I think that all indicates that Putin doesn't have the control over Trump that he thinks he has, and he's very worried indeed.
I think, again, Sir Richard Dearlove was making comments about the incoming Trump administration a few moments ago that pretty much echo what you've just been saying. Colonel Philip Ingram, thank you very much for coming on GB News this morning. Or this afternoon, indeed. Coming up, the latest instalment of my Taste of Britain series. I'll be joined by head chef at Hythe and Seek, Fabio De Paulis, to share his love of Italian cuisine and what he's cooking up in his restaurant, which overlooks the River Thames in London. See you shortly. You are watching Sunday with Mike Portillo, only on GB News.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Telegraph now with bra news. And Lewis, do you remember when you took your girlfriend for her first fitting?
This is M&S Trans Row. I've got a youngish girlfriend. But
she was youngish when you first met her 20 years ago.
Yes, stay young. I don't know. I don't even want to read it. It's so pervy. It sounds pervy. If I think it's pervy, it's probably very pervy.
Okay.
It says it's first bras for young things. They can't even say young girls.
Well, let's have a look at it. It's upsetting. Strong, smart, strong, supported, First bras for fearless young things. So this has been picked up, actually, Bev Turner from GB News took a photo of it, put it online, it's created a bit of a furore.
First of all, those kind of bras are basically unnecessary. They were, when I was that age...
Wearing your bra?
Wear those bras. They used to call them training bras.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they really were necessary at that time because they didn't have, like...
You've really got to the heart of this, haven't you?
This is one time I'm not going to interrupt you.
Yeah, it's not... No, they're not really necessary. It's like, it's not... Because otherwise...
So really, this is a non-story.
Okay.
Well, I think it's... I don't know. I mean, there's a little bit of me that was kind of like, pick your battles. Is this the hill to die on? I don't know.
The young things, they're saying I would say it's a dodgy advert anyway, it feels like, because saying young things feels like it's as it says here, like objective. It's sort of saying that they're objects.
Yes, but this is my point about the West. Like, are you aware of a company called Pretty Little Thing? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, one of the major brands for young women in this country is called Pretty Little Thing. I just think that's hilarious. Where were the feminists when they named that? So you go on the tube any day of the week and it says Pretty Little Thing and there's these women in tiny dresses and I don't know.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
Oh, no, you didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised. I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Fabio De Paulis is the head chef at London's Hythe and Seek, which is located in the Westin London City Hotel. During his career, Fabio has worked in Bermuda, Milan, Turkey, Malaysia, and now in the British capital. In each place, he showcased his love of Italian cooking, which is part of his upbringing and heritage. And he joins me now. Fabio, thank you for coming in. It's great to see you.
Nice to meet you.
So you were born near Rome.
Yeah, in a very small town. It's called Serrone, about an hour south of Rome, on the hillside.
Was it a place of excellent cuisine?
It is, indeed. A place of excellent cuisine and red wines. In fact, it's the only DOCG red wine of the region,
Most of your career, I mean, this may seem self-evident, you've cooked Italian. I'm thinking that's quite a challenge to cook Italian in Malaysia, to cook Italian in Bermuda or Turkey. Was that a challenge?
It was, but I like challenges, so that's one of the reasons why I started to travel, because of my job. For example, in Malaysia, I've been sent there to twist a grill restaurant into an Italian restaurant inside a five-star hotel. And I was doing the chef training for the local chefs. And then I build the menus, I train the chefs, and then I eventually go back.
In Italian food, is there lots of innovation?
I would say in the past 10 years, yes. It used to be a very traditional cuisine, but in the past 10, 15 years, Italian chefs, they are a bit more open-minded, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, give us some examples of your innovation.
Well, Hide and Seek is very well around the innovation. In that bar is a bar and kitchen where we have a sherry plate concept, where we try to take our guests in a culinary journey, starting from a classic dish and then reinventing into a modern twist. Usually I like to twist the style of cuisine between different countries, different continents.
Yes. So where you are now at the Westin, Hythe and Seek, this is not exclusively Italian?
No. It's not. It's actually, we do have two restaurants. Hide and Seek is a bar and kitchen. And then we also have another beautiful restaurant which is called Mosaic, where we do international cuisine. Hide and Seek, again, is a journey for our guests where we twist different kind of cuisine from all around the world in a sharing plate concept.
You may have seen that I placed my napkin on my lap because you brought in some delicious food. Would you like to introduce me to what you have here?
Of course. This is veal shank ossobuco on semolina gnocchi. It's a twist of two different traditional dishes. One from Rome, where I come from, and one from Milan, where my first break as a chef. It's a veal shank stew, braised, served on this semolina cake.
Right. So I'm going to put this up here so that we can see it a little bit. Would you mind giving me a glass of wine, please?
Of course, I want.
What wine did you consider would go with this?
As the concept is to do a journey, it was too easy to have an Italian wine, right? So we choose Pinot Noir from Oregon, USA.
Oregon?
Yeah, about an hour south from Portland. Due to the soil, which is on volcanic
soil,
and also the wind from the Pacific Ocean, this wine has a tremendous flavors, okay? Even though it's a very young one, it's from 2022. And it perfectly matches with this dish, which has a lot of rich flavor.
I'm going to put that to the test.
What do you think?
I think it's a joy. I think that is absolutely lovely. Lots of flavour, as you say.
And the
beautiful shank.
It's usually, in a traditional way, served with saffron risotto as a main course, but there in Hide and Seek, as I said, we like to reinvent dishes. We twist into sharing dish concept. So
a saffron risotto, would that be typical of Milan?
Yeah. But we did a twist with the gnocchi di semolina, which is actually come from the Roman Jewish ghetto cuisine.
Would you like to try it yourself?
Of course.
You have fun with your cuisine. That's what I'm getting from you.
A lot.
I love the way you use the word twist all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like a little, almost like a little joke, a little pun. Playing with words, playing with food.
Yeah. After all my travels, I decided that I was bored of just classic Italian cuisine. I always had the dream to have a place where we can actually match everything I learned from all around the world. In fact, we do have many dishes with influence from different countries, and invite our guests to come to try our food there.
And compared with all the places where you've cooked, how do you feel about being in London? I mean, do you have, as it were, a big audience? Do you have good palates in London to sample your food and your wine?
Definitely. There is a very high level of educated people about food, I will say. London has a melting pot of different kinds of cuisine, and it's the perfect theater for myself to express all the creativity that I have.
Fabio, it's been so kind of you to come in and to bring me this absolutely delicious food. And I wish you very, very well at the Westin with Hide and Seek, from which you can look out over Shakespeare's Globe and the River Thames and all those fine things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Fabio, but thank you also, loyal viewers, for watching Sunday with Michael Portillo this week. Thanks to all my guests, particularly those who were able to come into the studio. I will be back next week, the 1st of December. Look forward to that very much indeed. Up next is The Weekend with Darren Grimes. Please enjoy the remaining days of November. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Storm Bert continues to give strong winds and some outbreaks of heavy rain in places too, and exceptionally mild for the time of year. Huge contrast to what we had just a few days ago. Storm Bert, just sat across the north of the UK, continues to push its way eastwards. Tightly packed isobars there indicating strong winds for many of us, and heavy rain too. Rain particularly heavy across central southern parts of England and Wales as we go through this evening time. Blustery winds and frequent showers across the northwest of Scotland as well. Gusts here 60-70 miles an hour for a time before easing a little later into the early hours. Temperatures overnight 6 or 7 degrees across the north, still holding on to double figures in the southeast. So mild for the time of year. Rain though initially across southeast England, but this starts to clear away. And if we look at the details for Monday morning, the centre of Bert still just sat there near Orkney and Shetland, giving strong winds, outbreaks of rain, frequent showers across much of Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. Temperatures around 6 or 7 Celsius. Brighter for Northern England into central parts of England and Wales, but a scattering of showers in the west. Still some blustery winds, and as I mentioned, the rain clearing southeast England too. So Monday for the day ahead is a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Showers most frequent across the north and the west of the UK. It still remains quite windy here, particularly across northern Scotland, with the centre of the low just pushing its way eastwards. Colder air starts to dig in behind, and we could see some of the showers turn to sleet and snow, particularly over the higher ground. Temperatures here maximum staying in single figures, so a little nearer to average for the time of year in the south, around 10 or 11 Celsius. As we go into the evening time, further showers pushing their way eastwards, remaining windy across the north of the UK. Perhaps another area of rain moving across into southwest England later on in the day. And for the next few days, it remains mixed. There'll be further showers and rain at times, but there will be some sunshine and temperatures nearer to average for the time of year.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Sunday, the 24th of November. This is The Weekend on GB News. Storm Bert has well and truly battered Britain. Strong winds and heavy snow swept across many parts of the UK, with a major incident being declared in Wales. Then Sir Keir Starmer has been left bracing for a humiliating Commons debate after more than 650,000 people signed a petition to hold yet another general election. And should you be ashamed to be posh? Jacob Rees-Mogg's wife says she hates how posh she sounds, but should someone ever be ashamed of what they sound like? I've got a thing or two I could say about that, I tell you. I'm Darren Grimes, and this is The Weekend. Now, this show is absolutely nothing without you and your views. Let me know your thoughts on all of those stories and more that we'll be discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/your say to join that conversation. There, I've got it right in front of me right now. Now, keeping me company on today's show is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and the broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon. But before we get stuck into today's stories, we're going to get your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you. The top stories. Well, another weather alert has been issued and more than 200 flood alerts are in place in the UK as Storm Bert continues to sweep across the country. The Met Office says there's potential for fast-flowing or deep floodwater to cause danger to life today after heavy downpours and strong winds battered much of the country. A major incident has been declared in parts of South Wales due to river flooding. Homes and cars are reportedly underwater there. Yellow wind warnings come into force for large parts of England as well, with gusts of up to 65 miles per hour expected in some places. A man died yesterday morning after a tree fell on his car due to the weather conditions. 2 others died yesterday in the crashes on roads during the stormy weather.